You're watching one of a series of videos where Alisa Childers and I respond to 23 progressive Christian claims, kind of like a progressive Christian manifesto that was written by Ragamuffin TV. We deal with these claims, some good, some bad, some ugly, and I'm hoping that this helps you to think biblically.
Number 19 says, why would a God who says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, later decide to kill his own son as a sacrifice? He wouldn't. God didn't demand a sacrifice. We did. This is a big one in the progressive Christian church. I hear this in different iterations all over the place in books and blogs and podcasts. This is a very core tenet, I think, of the progressive church. How would you respond?
Well, okay, at the risk of sounding rude, and I wouldn't do this in public. In public, everything's rude. Yeah. But in private, I would want to ask the person, do you care about the context of Hosea 6:6? Do you care what Hosea meant when he wrote these words? And I just want them to say yes, because they have to. How can they not care? Yeah. And then say, let's look at it. And if you read Hosea, and I mean, I wouldn't mind just reading the whole book with them if they'll wait. But if they'll just read Hosea, then they'll see the people of Israel were living in rebellion to God, yet they were still offering sacrifices, but great rebellion, apostasy, false beliefs, and false practices. And so God says, I'm going to cut off your sacrifices. I'm sick of it. Yeah. And when he says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, what he means is, I want you to follow me. Don't just offer these sacrifices and think everything's fine. Right. And so he cuts off their sacrifices. Then later in Hosea, God predicts that there's a time coming when he'll restore sacrifices to Israel and they will be pleasing to him. So even in Hosea, God just doesn't want empty religious behaviors. He wants hearts that are after him. Yeah. But guess what? That still includes sacrifice. Yeah. The basic idea here, Proverbs 15:8 says, the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord. That's Hosea 6:6. It's a sacrifice of the wicked here. In Mark 1:44, Jesus kind of weighs in on this a bit because he heals a leper and then he tells the leper to go and offer the sacrifices commanded in the law. So Jesus commands a leper to offer 2 birds, is what we're required, in the temple because he's not as opposed to sacrifice as the progressives have been told. Yeah. In Mark 14:24, Jesus uses this amazing phrase, this, his blood, he's holding up the cup, this is the communion passage, this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Blood of a covenant is entirely sacrificial terminology, right? That you would sacrifice an animal as a way of, they called it cutting a covenant. So we have a covenant with this offering of the animal, and then we partake together because we're both partaking of this covenant. He's saying, I am that sacrifice. In Hebrews 10:12, listen to this. It says, when Christ had offered for all time a single sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of God. Jesus is not seen as anti-sacrifice. He is seen as the ultimate sacrifice. So there's a danger here in only thinking in verses, but not thinking in books and in context. And that's something they're falling into. God did demand sacrifice and he provided it through himself. And the best they can do is to try to make that look as ugly as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, and it reminds me so much of the Old Testament concept of the solemn assembly. All throughout the Old Testament, you have God commanding Israel to do a solemn assembly or sacred assembly where they would have a feast and a festival, and it was a time of, I believe it was a time of observing holiness and they wouldn't work, and it was this thing that God commanded them to do. But in Amos, he says, I hate your feast. I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like God's not saying you never had to be doing those. He's saying your heart is not with me. This is hypocrisy. And so, but you're right. This is what happens when you just pluck a verse and then offer it to people who probably aren't reading the whole Bible in context. It can be very persuasive. Well, God said, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. So they must have misunderstood all the times that apparently God told them to do the sacrifices. We have to read the whole context to know God's heart regarding some of these things.
I'm going to be putting up one of these videos every single day until the entire series is uploaded on my channel with a playlist, so you might want to subscribe if you want to get those notifications. But if you can't wait, there's links to the 2 video interviews in large form that I already did on Alisa Childers' channel down below.